So we've already done our non-meta solo Grandmaster, which we posted previously with a Arc Titan Action War Rig Sweep business. It's a fun run, but it wasn't a meta run. This is now going to be my stance on how to sort of solo farm this in a sense this week. So I believe probably Arc Warlock to be the strongest for this Grandmaster, just because of the immense damage you can put out from range. You don't have to play too risky. It's just overall really good. Well, it is in the game generally at the minute anyways. So the first thing you want to know is, or should be doing, is making sure that you have all the Arc mods unlocked for your artifact. Do that first, and also have counter charge on. Right, those are the first two things. Then do your build. Right, I've already showed the build at the start. If you want a dim link, it's always in the description now. So I'm going to stop sort of putting them in the pinned comments all the time now, but just it'll be in the description. So any video from now on that's solo wise, that's people want a build for, the dim link is in the description. Generally, I'll always do that. So with the run itself, we'll have first barrier isn't a problem, providing that you deal with all the ads quickly enough. Get your pulse grenade down, get your heal and rift down. Quicker you do that, you know, the more arc soul you've got, especially when you amplify your arc soul, and it does more work for you. This little room ahead, if you clear the solo wizard and all the hive enemies, the fallen champ will focus on you. That is what you want. You don't want the fallen champ to be looking at the hive. So if you do that, make it a little bit quicker, a little bit easier, because we're trying to play a little bit efficient. We're not trying to stand back too much. We're trying to sort of clear each room as quickly, as efficiently as you sort of can without it being a super risky run. So this little barrier here, I don't know if I've done it on this run, but the way to clear the barrier, actually, yeah, I think I do. That's fine, actually, I do on this run. So what I'm doing there is trying not to kill the two acolytes that spawn in with that particular barrier. Because if you kill the two acolytes before you get to shield break, the barrier will go in middle, and it's more of a nuisance to you. So I recommend your first super usage, that's number one, is on the first barrier. The second barrier, sorry, in this room. It makes it clear faster. Then focus on... You don't actually need to focus on the wizards and the hive enemies on this little encounter. Focus on the overload. Get a pulse grenade down directly top mid. That'll jolt all the targets and kill all the enemies. So you're using the barrier, the overload, as a jolt target to kill all the surrounding enemies around the champ. Right? So you're actually doing the reverse of what I generally recommend. Generally, I recommend isolate champions away from enemies. With Arc 3.0 classes, it's actually the opposite. If you can actually keep the enemies alive and just confront the overload or the champ, right? You can use the champ as a jolt target to kill all the enemies whilst you kill the champ. So you're multitasking. If there's any chance to do that, then do it. So for phase one of the three, where you're defending the zone, I haven't actually got a pulse grenade, but I've got a healing, so we'll use that now. Let the arc target, the arc fall and go around that corner, that's fine. All I'm interested in is using my super to clear out the champ, and hopefully the arc target, but the arc target actually didn't push. Sometimes he does, he's actually around the corner. Because what I'm doing right now is kind of waiting on my nade anyways. So that's fine, I'm actually not really losing time. I am when he keeps pouring out my attacks though. Use the heavy shot to finish off. Okay, so we've got a pulse grenade now. So we'll use that to the ads at the ghost section. Then immediately turn around and wait for the 3 dregs that have a lot of wolves. They can actually kill you fast, so be careful of them, but they spread out. That's the thing with those. They spread out, so you want to kill them as soon as they come out of that door. I think there's 1 dreg alive. This is stopping the next wave, because the next wave of enemies is going to be shanks. So knowing all the waves right? Like exactly what doors they come out of, how many are they, will help you clear this little section a little bit quicker. So I'm waiting on my pulse nade to get that down. The healing rift. You want to be spamming your abilities as much as possible. I'm using Curse Reach, which means I'm not going to be able to get as much ability energy as what Crown of Tempest would, or the Fallen Sunstar, I think it's called, the helmet. But Curse Reach has so many more other benefits that my ability uptime is good enough anyways. And I get a super that does huge amounts of damage to champions and bosses. You're solo. So I still think there are builds out there, but I still think the old Chaos Reach, especially because of what it's doing now, is more useful. Generally, it's more useful on an Arc Warlock when you're solo. When you clear 2 wizards and a portion of the enemies, the barrier will spawn in. Ideally, you want to be on top of the barrier and spawn kill that barrier before the barrier goes into mid. If you have the barrier wander in mid, this then takes the aggro off you, and then the hive and the fallen fight. You don't really want that because that's going to take longer. So ideally, spawn kill the barrier. That's your next time to use the super. We'll get a rift down, take care of these 2 knights. These knights can actually 2-shot you melee, so just be careful of them. But they don't come all the way down this hill area, which is a good place to stand, because you can just bow all the enemies from here. The sniper can be annoying, the one up on the perch. That's why I'm going to go in this little room here. So this room here is good when there's a less amount of enemies, but you want to hurry up and get to the next phase. It's actually nice because there's a lot of cover in here, and it means the sniper can't hit you from here as well. So it's actually good, a nice place to stand as well. But I wouldn't recommend standing in here on the shank phase or when the start of a fresh phase when there's overloads. Definitely not. It's just for a latter end of a phase when you get to the next phase. So phase 2 is all about overloads. There's no more barriers and stuff. There's a lot of arc shields, so we want to pulse nade in a rift arm. Sometimes you can fight on the top of this tanker thing like this. Well, I recommend that you do, but only with a healing rift. And you can jolt a lot of the enemies. You get a lot of chain damage off. That sniper will hit you on the top perch, but as long as you've got the right resistance mods on, so double arc resist concussive dampener. The double arc resist will protect against snipers. The concussive dampener will help you against a lot of enemy types, a lot of damage. Anytime you're struggling to survive in a GM, use concussive dampener because it is a huge thing. It is a huge mod that's really good. So you can see, fighting up here is really good when you've got a rift going. I believe there's 2 shields left around that corner. The next phase of enemies have spawned in, so this is actually a good time for me just to use super with a pulse nade, and then just melt down that overload. Melted a couple of the ads as well. We're then going to go to our safe zone. This is where, on the old GMs for Devil's Lair, this is where you had to stand. You couldn't really stand anywhere else. But because of the where we are in the game now with resistance and how we play in GMs, you can push a bit more than what you used to back in the day. I'm on about a year or 2 ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was. Before the resistance buff, when was that? Season of the Haunted. So before pre-Season of the Haunted, GMs were a lot harder than what they are now. Really the hardest GMs now in the game are the Battleground GMs. The rest of the GMs in the game aren't too bad apart from Lightblade. Lightblade's always a bit of a tough one. But all the other GMs in the game I can think of really are, they're decent to play. The Battleground GMs though aren't. None of them. I don't see any of them, like I haven't enjoyed it. Not one of them that I've played. It might be because I have a personal issue with them being as a Grandmaster Nightfall. I mean, I don't mind them being in strikes. But what we failed to realise when they introduced them originally, the Battleground playlist, into the Strike playlist, everyone said, okay, yeah, that's fine, you can do that. But then they then swung in and said, oh, it's going to be a GM as well. So we give them license to do that, and then they went the whole way with it. And I don't know anyone who said pre-Battlegrounds, I would love to have Battlegrounds as a GM. Nobody said that on Reddit. Nobody said that. The only people that wanted to give us that was Bungie, because it was convenient to them to code and freshen up the Grandmaster playlist, because the Grandmaster playlist has suffered now for a bit in terms of repeat GMs. People are getting tired of gilding their Conqueror because it's the same GMs, right? It's the same play loop. The only thing I would say the only thing that's their saving grace is that the seasonal mods change. So even though Devil's Lair is the way it is now, say it was up next season, it would be a different play loop because it's different mods. There might be a different build or builds. So that's their only saving grace. Like, imagine if it wasn't like that. Who the hell would run like Insight Terminus for the 10th time? Who would run Devil's Lair this amount of times? Right? So it's just what the game is right now. We're at the end of its life cycle for this era. So you just have to ride it out until times come interesting again. So this little section can be tough for people because the play loop here is that the barrier shields the enemies and the enemies just keep firing their arc at you. So you need to start with a healing rift. Get the 2 snipers on the top of the building first though, because they do a lot of damage. So kill those, right? Then get a healing rift arm and then prime the barrier to get a shield break, then pop super. Don't pop super right away, because the barrier will obviously shield. You always do damage to a champ after they've been stunned, like for a barrier, I mean, obviously, because they're gonna put the shield up. So with this outside section, this is the longest section of the whole Nightfall. The start section's short, the boss is short, but the outside section isn't so short. So how can we speed this little section up? Bear in mind, I could have got this faster as well, so don't be thinking that I sort of done this to maximum speed. I didn't. But I do know how to run it quickly enough. So you need to understand the enemy spawns and how they work. So there's different things going on here. When you initially come here, there is obviously enemies. But when you push up to a, let's call it a line in the sand mechanic, because that's the only way I can really explain it to you. Once you get past a certain section, a wave of enemies will spawn. Once you get past this broken bridge, right, you spawn in the Briggs and the tank and an additional overload, I think. But there was already an overload here, so that means right now on the map there is 2 overloads. Right? There'll be one overload that will end up pushing and one overload that will hug the barrier, because there's also a barrier champ. So the first thing is go left hand side, because left hand side is safer than right hand side. The thing about left hand side is you need to make sure that some of those snipers are killed though. Keep putting suppression with the Monarque on the snipers where the tank is, because there's 3 or 4 resilient vandals. Those are dangerous because they can triple. If all of them snipe you at once, which has happened to me, you'll be killed immediately. Your main focus is the enemies in front of you and the brig. The overload will eventually come over here and be curious. That's ideally what you want. I was actually going to Chaos Rage this, but I didn't end up doing that. I just helped to just maintain the poison damage of the Monarque. The brig is getting in the way of the overload a little bit, but it's fine because of the Monarque's poison damage. It's keeping the suppression going. Don't be frightened to sprinkle in a couple of heavy shots here and there. Don't spam too much heavy though on the champs, because you're going to want a bit of heavy later on. Depends on your bricks. It depends on your brick on your drops. Then you can calculate how much sort of heavy that you want to start to use. You are going to get some heavy generated out here. Don't get me wrong, because of the Monarque. It's an exotic primary and they generate more heavy ammo anyways. Right, there's an increased chance. The Briggs, when they do their secondary mode where they jump up in the air, I wasn't trusting him, because they do actually one-shot you. If you're in their solar attack, It's a one-shot. So there's an actual range drop-off that the enemy has, the Briggs. I don't know what that meterage is. I don't think anyone really knows. But I know by just playing, and I know how far or how close I can be without being hit. If you're thinking that you're going to be hit within that range of the attack, stop what you do and go all the way to the back of the map. The Brig definitely will not hit you back there. Unfortunately, that pulse grenade hit the bridge. I was trying to jolt the Vandals, but that's my next job, is to try and get a lot of these Vandals. Because the way I'm going to do this is, I'm not going to deal with the barrier right now. We're going to actually deal with the tank. I'm going to case reach the tank because this saves on heavy ammo and it deals massive damage to the tank. I know we're getting some immunes there, but that's the tank half HP. The next indicator for enemies is when you break a leg of the tank. When you break at least one leg, you will get a skiff ship in with a spawn of enemies. I think it's Marauders. I think it's Invisible Marauders. Oh no, and there's a champ as well. So you actually get an overload there. So there's still 2 overloads. I believe there's still 2 overloads up on the map and a barrier. The reason why I don't say it like the way I've done it, don't deal with the barrier yet, because there's an overload hugging the barrier, just the way I've done it. So what I'm going to end up doing is going to direct mid, because there's different ways where you can DPS the tank from. There's left hand side and then there's mid. When you DPS in mid, it's pretty safe from here, and you have an angle on all 4 legs. I was just prepping a lot of the snipers. See, if you stand here, the snipers hide and hide, but when you're on left and you push them a little bit, they'll it gives you a chance to do damage to them. Because I need all the resilient vandals down, because when the tank is killed, the barrier will go where the tank is. If there's still resilient vandals up, the barrier will tether the resilient vandals and make it a nightmare for me to try and kill the barrier. So this is a good way of doing it, but you need to make sure that you've got the resilient snipers down. The right hand side Brig will de-aggro entirely until you start to fight him. Right, that's why I haven't dealt with him. I'm actually using the Brig to farm super energy, so pay attention to the left hand side super bar, how much super I'm actually getting. Don't be shy to pulse nade. When you're going to pulse nade a Brig, don't do it until they stand and do their void attack. They've got their arc and void. Because when they do their void attack, they actually just stand in place, but the arc one, they'll do their dodge and left and right. So like that, when he puts his gun up like that, that's when you would do the perfect pulse grenade. When the Brig obviously gets to a 3rd HP, the faceplate comes off. That's when you want to put in your crit damage. I end up using my super here, I think. I can't mind. I think I do. Just for easy, just for quickness, right, to get it over with. Because we're going to generate so much super energy, it's worth using because there's all these champs. So now back to the tank. Tank is almost taken out. The only time to worry when you're up here is if the tank does the solar attack. Just pay attention, just stop what you're doing a little bit to see where that line is actually showing. Because that is obviously going to be a one-shot no matter what. Unless you get caught. If you just get sort of caught or chipped with it a little bit, where you're not in its blast radius fully, but a little bit, then it'll just take you like half HP. But a direct hit obviously will one-shot. I've got 2 linear shots left. So I'm just using the Monarque to finish the tank. The barrier will then go where the tank is. You just watch. There's actually a sniper to my right, which I didn't see. So we'll deal with the sniper first. Then we'll deal with the overload. Try and get a good pulse nade on the overload. That will then jolt the overload to clear out all the ads surrounding the overload, or most of them. We can then safely deal with this overload. So this overload was hugging the barrier, obviously not now. Because the barrier, it's some weird AI. I love it when things like this happen. Like, I don't know why, but the barrier like wants to go where the tank is. and doesn't stay in middle. And that happens every time, because I've done this more than once to know that. It's good because the barrier won't actually tether the overload at the back of the map, right? Which means you can actually deal with the overload in mid and then the one at the back. Generally, if the overload hides, sometimes the one at the back will. If that happens, then deal with the barrier instead. I know I haven't got any heavy, so that's fine, but I'm going to actually use my next super on a barrier. Because remember, a super Chaos Reach can kill an overload once you primed that overload and got your first shield break. Overload is less than a third. So you can see the Monarque, even though its tick damage has been nerfed, it's still usable. It's still going to consistently stun. It's very similar, to be honest. If you put on the Void Surge and counter charge this season, you're not going to see any difference too much. I mean, if we don't have counter charge up next season, which we probably won't, then yeah, it's not going to feel quite as good as right now, but it's still going to feel alright. You're still going to be able to get consistent stuns. It's still going to be probably the go-to pick when there's a lot of overloads, like Glassware and stuff like that. Like Le Monarque's still going to be like a top pick for that. So once we've killed the barrier, we can then spawn in the final overload champion, which spawns when you go past that red box. So I've done that on purpose. Like, imagine I didn't kill the barrier and we pushed up. The barrier would then definitely shield this overload, which would then create a dilemma. You never want that. That is the worst time ever. Whenever a barrier tethers an overload, it's the worst time for you. So never allow that to happen in any GM that you're doing. So I know that this particular overload will fight us from the left. This is good, because it means all this other adds can't really hit us much, and I can just chip away at his HP. We've got 14 shots. This is when you want to start to conserve ammo and think about your ammo. I actually just rushed to the boss, but I'm sure there was a brick or two somewhere. I just didn't end up picking it up. I actually just made a deal with myself and said 14's enough. Because your ammo, it doesn't matter that much. I mean, you want 10 plus shots, okay? 10 plus shots, 12 plus shots is healthy enough. I'm skipping the Arc Captain, because all he's doing is wasting our time at this point. And then we can show you with the boss. So we're 22:45. So we're literally going to do the boss in like 8 minutes. So I'll show you how you can sort of do this boss quickly. So you want to make sure that you got a Chaos Reach, which you're going to have one. You're going to farm super energy off the 2 overloads that spawn up here. You want to get a pulse grenade down on you first, because that's when this encounter is more dangerous, when there's 2 overloads up. So use everything that you've got on the first overload, because once the first overload's killed, it's just you and 1 overload, which isn't a problem. We were actually doing stun damage to both of them. That was a good thing, so it sped it up. Make sure you got a healing rift as well. I've just about got a healing rift back. I'm going to use for DPS a pulse grenade, and then 1 or 2 shots, depending on how I feel. 1 or 2 shots, and then we're going to go up here. The reason for this is for our Chaos Reach. Some of the ads will hit you a little bit, but not too much, so it's actually decent. Our goal is to get the boss below a third, to get the servitors to spawn in. Once you've done that, you can safely run down here. Trust me, it's actually pretty safe to do that. It's not threatening. You're not really in much of a risk. Then on phase 1, this Arc Captain always pushes. I don't know why, but he always does. The melee one. So you want to get it. That's what you want to get a rift down for. The Arc Soul will stun the shield. The Monarque will suppress him a little bit as well, because of overload. Don't let him melee you if you can help it. Finish it if you want. I generally sometimes don't do that though. Like if an enemy's finishable, but I don't need to finish the enemy, I don't. You know why? Because I might generate heavy ammo. I'd rather get a Monarque kill than a finisher kill. But if I had to get a finisher kill because it was in my best interest to do that, then I would get the finisher kill. I'll do what's in my best interest at the time. So now really on phase 1, you don't have to really kill any of the adds. You can really just, I mean, put a rift down, use a pulse grenade here and there, right? But mainly your focus is the servitors, right? You can get hit in this room. I'm sure you know that. Nades through the door. But it's all about angles. Just get your angle right, and generally you're alright. What I should have put on the build, and I was doing this at the time and I forgot, was shield break charge. I should have fit shield break charging. That would have sped this run up, because I would have then procced armor charge and then void surge, and it would have sped up me killing the servitors quicker. So I'd highly recommend shield break charge for this GM. I just forgot about that mod to put it on, because I very rarely run shield break charge, because my complaint, right, this is going to be a complaint. Match game now, well, not match game, but elemental shields are now worse in the game than they have ever been. They serve no purpose other than shield break charge to get an armor charge. I used to like the old match game thing. They went overboard with match game, right? It was a bit too much at times, like having to match shields, but that was part of it, right? Keeping 3 elemental linears, keeping 3 elemental scouts for the time that vouchsafe might be useful for this. You know, this scout might be useful for that, or osmosis scouts might be useful, or whatever weapon type. Osmosis was useful. Now there's really no point to elemental shields anymore, because you can override them with anything. They serve no purpose. They may as well have just removed elemental shields entirely. What's the point in having them? They serve no purpose. So I think the way they went about it, the removal of match game, wasn't good. It wasn't a good play on doing that. That's one instance where they went too easy with it. But they probably done that because they made everything hard in the game. So like Legend Nightfalls are hard, Legend missions are hard, even hero missions are like harder than what they used to be. So they thought, right, if we include that change, that sandbox change, with the way it is on Neomuna, plus have match game, oh, that would be too much. Let's get rid of match game. I would have rather it the other way. Have the game was what it was pre-Lightfall with match game shields. Have match game as have GM Nightfalls as your end game content. Planets should have just been how they are. They're just standard enemies. Like Neomuna is terrible to play on. No one plays it. Why? There's no incentive, no loot. Red border weapons don't drop. The Vex Strike Force is once a blue moon. The enemies are overly tanky for no reason at all. And the rest of the game is coated with that same sandbox difficulty, which doesn't need to be there. That is for GMs. Your GM content is for your endgame stuff, really. My Master and Legend Nightfalls shouldn't have sworded in it. You should not be power capped on those activities. Those activities should be as they worked in the past. They are used for the first half of the season to farm shards, to do some early game solos. Then when GMs come out, you play the GMs. That's how it's meant to work. But now it's like Master Nightfalls are harder than GM Nightfalls. If you don't believe me, go and solo one with Togetherness on, and then tell me if you agree, because it totally is. The scaling of the game makes no sense anymore. The second overload will hide, right? Depending on how many enemies are alive. It's really interesting how overloads work. So if there is 2 overloads alive, but there's a lot of adds alive, even if you kill one, the other one will still push up until a point. If there's a lot of adds killed on the map, the second overload will not push you. The game's telling you need to push the overload. So that was a good opportunity for me there, just to use my super. Because I know that there's an arc captain that keeps doing his arc shots. So it was just a perfect time to do Curse Reach on that second overload, the one that's annoying, that hides. We can then work on the servitors. We're 70% to a super, which is what I'm going to need for the DPS on the last phase, because we're basically just going to skip the final phase and just kill the boss, which you're going to see. You want a couple of linear shots, I think, for this, just in case, like a couple of backup shots, because your Chaos Reach won't kill the boss entirely. Like, it won't do a third, but it'll do close to a third damage. We're killing the final servitor now. Like I said, shield break charge would have been handy in this, just with the servitors, just being able to kill them a little quicker. Shoot to loot's also a usable perk in this. So if you've got an auto rifle kinetic with shoot to loot, that's actually handy because you can just shoot out that window, get your bricks. That's a handy thing. I just used whatever auto rifle I had on me because it's literally a non-factor. All my barrier's doing is brick and shields. That's all it's doing. So we use a Chaos Reach plus Healing Rift. It's important that you Healing Rift plus do that. Then we'll get an extra stun with our pulse grenade and then finish the boss off with our remaining linear fusion ammo. That was a run. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.